Good morning, everyone. County Sheriff, America's last hope. I'd just start by saying I think we would all agree that our first hope is the same as our founders, and that's God and the American people that believe deeply in liberty. And I can't think of a more fitting place than Liberty University to be holding this great day of gathering of all of us of like minds. So Sheriff Mack, it's an honor to be participating today and be with all of you fellow sheriffs from around the country. I appreciate your time and hope that if you have any questions, we'll get to see each other afterwards and get to know each other a little better. The constitutional sheriffs, that association title, the first time I heard it, I remember thinking to myself, constitutional sheriffs. It's almost like saying that there's a followers of God pastors association, because, I mean, aren't we all supposed to be following the Constitution, and that's where it's based on. And sadly, we're at a state in our country where whether it's our chiefs of police or even some sheriffs who really don't, I don't think they think deeply enough about the role that they serve and the office they hold and what it truly means to America. I'd start off with what many of you may have heard my name for the first time in the last 8 months or a year. If you have heard of me before, I'm a small town sheriff here in Virginia, Culpeper. It's about an hour southwest of D.C. Small population of about 52,000, and I think I work with some of the greatest officers in the country. Proud to serve there now in my third term. I didn't see it as a big thing. I looked at the stance that I took here in Virginia. Like many states, we've soon become blue, and it's a sad day to see some of the things that our legislature, newly elected, immediately after they were elected last year, started to push through some radical Second Amendment restrictions. And you know, as a sheriff, I know that there's many that will follow that long line across the country, police officers or some government leaders that think they do want to take away some of those assault weapons and things that they view that the average citizen shouldn't have, and I couldn't disagree more. Let's start and think for a minute. A lot of law enforcement here, a lot of years of service, thousands of years of service in the room. So let me start by asking you a question. Raise your hand if you can recall in your jurisdiction at any time in your service an offensive attack committed by someone with a so-called assault weapon, an actual crime or an assault, an offensive attack by someone using an assault weapon. Raise your hand. Do you remember one? Wow. We really need to restrict those, right? Now, thinking along that lines, how about a defensive act? Raise your hand if you can think of a defensive act committed by someone with a so-called assault weapon. You respond to any of those? I can recall one in particular. There's a few of those. Defense. Now, raise your hand if you can recall maybe at least 100 or more incidences where someone used some cheap Saturday night special pistol, revolver to commit a crime. I think we all have. Dozens upon dozens or hundreds if you've been in it long enough. So my view is not, I don't think, strange to think that the gun lobby, the ones who want to take away the weapons from our good citizens, their goal is pretty clear. It's to start with the weapons that they want to make scary and say are the most dangerous, and it's just a first step down that slope of wanting to take away more and more of the very things that our citizens need to defend themselves, especially those of us who are sheriffs in rural areas. I know we got some major county sheriffs here and have some very large urban areas they serve, but I can tell you, that one right, as we all know, protects all the others. Think about what we've seen just in the last year with COVID. Talk about restricting rights. Think about the First Amendment. I mean, our country was founded with the freedom of religion to gather and worship as you choose. The right to be able to gather and assemble was going to be restricted in Virginia by our governor and his mandate of, because of COVID, they couldn't gather of 10 or more people and so forth. And around our country, we saw video and instances of where law enforcement was actually charging people for gathering even in a parking lot of a church. That's a sad day in America, but I think it's just part of that bigger agenda. There are more things at work than the average citizen sees. And once again, I do believe, sadly, we may be at that point where sheriffs are one of America's last hopes. My solution seems so strange, seems so odd to the average Virginian, even to the average sheriff in Virginia. When the legislature enacted or was starting to pass, they wanted to pass a gun bill restricting assault weapons, high-capacity magazines, and handguns. You know, it starts at 10, they modified it to 12, and then I think they wanted to go higher. But the fact is, in my county, and many of yours probably, we got thousands of concealed carry permit holders who carry a high-capacity magazine pistol every day. They do it safely, and I cannot think of a concealed carry permit holder with an incident where they've committed a crime that we had to respond to in my county, and I don't know of any of the counties around me either that have. Those are the people that have already been screened and vetted to be able to carry the weapons, and suddenly our legislature wants to make them a criminal, a felon, the day that they would carry that gun past that inaction date of July 1 to simply have the same gun they've been carrying for years because it had a high-capacity magazine. You know, the Supreme Court's already said weapons in common use, and I believe, you know, a high-capacity magazine pistol or America's most common semi-automatic rifle, the AR-15, certainly would qualify as something we have a right to keep based on our Second Amendment rights. So, seeing that, I had long given it thought. I actually had thought of what can a sheriff do years before. Well, President Obama was still president. And we knew we had Congress members that wanted to restrict gun rights. And there were some other issues of concern, but back then, in my first term, was when I met Sheriff Mack. And some of the information he gave our office, we brought him in to speak to my staff and some others, started, you know, me brainstorming and looking at other solutions. And it was after that time, leading up to the more recent time when our legislature decided to try to restrict gun rights, that I came up with what I felt was a logical solution. So often we hear, you know, it's not your job, as one speaker said earlier, to interpret the Constitution. And I like the way the other sheriff said, you know, enforcement. But the fact is, you know, if not us, who? I point to Caroline County, and I know we have someone here from Caroline Sheriff's Office today. I used in some of my speaking before, when you say that a sheriff shouldn't think about interpretation or judging what the Constitution means, in Caroline County, decades ago, that's not far from my county, there was a Loving case where an arrest was made of a couple simply because they were married and their skin color was different. And that went all the way to Supreme Court. Now, any sheriff that would allow an arrest to be made at that day and time, 100 years after the Civil War, if you couldn't figure out 100 years after the Civil War that we are all created equal and that God would not have a problem with someone different skin tone being married, I'd say it's a bit absurd. So who but a sheriff should have said, no, that law will not be enforced on my watch? Thank you. So I tried to use that as a reasonable explanation when I spoke with some of the members of the legislature that were talking about these laws, when I said, please don't do this. You know, there are solutions. I don't have to stand in front of a camera and say, I will not enforce this law or that law you enact. I promise you, I don't want to say this publicly because it will create a stir. It may create more stir than you want around America with all the sheriffs, because I still have a right to swear in a posse, an auxiliary deputy. In Virginia, it's not like in every state, but thank you. I know every state is different. I know many of my counterparts in the northeast part of the country have, you know, their states have had great restrictions put on the rights of the sheriff down through the years. They've lost a lot of that ability they once had to do certain things. But in Virginia, we've long had the right to be able to swear in those of our choosing, you know, U.S. citizens, high school diploma, and a few qualifications. But we still have a right to swear in people, armed or unarmed, to serve as auxiliary deputies and do other things in other capacities. So whether it's a reserve or auxiliary force, posse. There is other terminology around the country. Every state's different. But I would encourage you sheriffs to just think, I am certainly not the smartest in the room, but I am the sheriff that's just sitting day and night thinking, what can I do to best serve the citizens in my county, those who elected me, who truly, truly are not breaking the law, have no intention of breaking the law, but their rights are being treaded on. And that was when the idea was that I would properly screen, I say that first, properly screen and vet thousands of people, citizens of the county, who own an AR-15, a high-capacity magazine pistol, and other things. Bring them in for an oath. And now, everyone in here in leadership is going, oh my God, the liability. Well, you know, every day we wake up, we've got a lot of liability. All those guys we've got out on the street. But thank you. But the people we serve, the people who put us in office, are the ones who are going to fall victim when their rights are restricted, because it is a slippery slope. And I would just say, think about in the overall picture as a sheriff, you have a lot of ability to restrict how you go about that. So I'll just throw a few things out among you as fellow sheriffs to think about. It's not a wide open, here's a set of keys, here's a cruiser, and a gun and a badge. No, it's very simple. We're an accredited agency through CALEA. I trying to tread very, very well on the lines of what's proper in policy and so forth, so there's no misunderstanding. But it's not that hard a concept. Thousands of people can be screened. We'll start first with our concealed carry permit holders who already have a certain level of screening. But we have had, since we announced, we have had hundreds of fellow law enforcement officers, current and retired, willing to serve as background investigators free of charge to work with us, to screen hundreds and thousands of people through quickly, and have these citizens brought in for an oath, issued an ID card, explained with a policy written that they sign off on. The metal badges that we wear, we won't issue. They will pay for one. We will keep it in the lock and storage of our custody. When called upon, they can be given a badge and allowed to do certain things we may need them to do. It could be anything from a search and rescue effort to other things maybe they're suited for. All walks of life. The citizens, you'd be amazed in your county at the jobs and backgrounds that they have. We're a bedroom community for DC. A lot of government workers or military and others that can provide great service to our community. And as part of being an auxiliary deputy, they will have to serve 8 hours a month, every month, in the service of our community. Not necessarily, locking people in a cell or anything. It could be things to assist in any agency in our county government, public service projects, and other things. There's a lot that can be done well, done really good for your community when you think about 10,000 people doing 8 hours a month, work and service in your community as a new auxiliary. Now, are they suddenly going to run home? Those guns that they've owned for years and have in their home doing nothing wrong, they're going to suddenly, because they have an ID card, they're going to run home and start committing crimes? I don't think so. Are they more likely to have some mental episode and do something they wouldn't normally? No, I don't think so either. We just started to ask a question a little bit ago. How often have you ever even heard of these weapons being used by the good people of our community, or even criminals for that matter? So it's food for thought, something to think of. I don't in any way say that I have the end-all solution to, when they try to come for our gun rights and restrict our citizens' right to own those. But I've said many times, it's a God-given right. We all agree on that. And that God-given right to self-defense, whether you believe in God or not, it's a law of nature. The law of nature, any creature is going to defend their life. And in America, we were founded on the principles and beliefs of a group of people who pledged so many things to the creation of this country. And it's up to us to keep it, to hold fast to that ideal that they had. The founders, when they wrote that document, those were weapons of war back then. And I won't repeat all the NRA talking points or the other gun rights arguments you may hear. But I'll just give you, my food for thought of what I've thought from the beginning. We're sheriffs. We're cops at heart. Most of us, I would assume, have all started out and worked a career, working the street, knowing what that entails. We've written that blank check, just like our military and others have, to give our life, if need be, for the people we serve. It's not a light thing. It's not things that most people do. But, if if you work through your career and you are fortunate enough, blessed enough to be chosen to lead an agency, to lead men in harm's way, if you are given that trust, the least you can do is remember to not focus so much on the day when you won't have that paycheck, that title, that rank, whatever, and just think about the founding of the principles of the country, what it means to have that honor to serve in the oldest law enforcement position in our country, and what it really means to our citizens who elected us. It's not just gun control. It's not just the First Amendment, as I mentioned about COVID restrictions and other things. It can be anything. Look at the civil unrest we're seeing in urban areas all over our country. We don't see it as much in the rural areas, do we? We don't have city police chiefs there as much. We have sheriffs elected by the people who make their own determination of what they're going to do, and not a mayor that can remove you from what you're doing in a blink of an eye in a state of emergency. Not a mayor who decides, who's never done law enforcement, what's right for the people in a crisis. We're professionals. We believe in the oath we take. We take it serious. And it's important more than ever to support one another, encourage one another, and let each other know that we're all in this together. We, I believe, really are America's last best hope. So thank you for your time. It's an honor to be here. I look forward to getting to speak with and get to know some of you better. Enjoy your day.